Hi, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. My name is Bridget Burns. I'm the Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed.
Each week, I bring you a conversation with a sitting college president or chancellor to help understand what it's like to navigate this moment, to elevate them as leaders, and to hopefully give you a bit of inspiration for the week ahead. So this is Weekly Wisdom.
This week, we're really excited to bring an interview with President G. Gabrielle Starr from Pomona College. She warned us right before we started that she had just had her second Moderna vaccine. So if she starts sweating profusely or bobbing and weaving, I guess we'll know why. But thanks for being here anyway.
Yes. You really are taking one for the team by being here today. We had no idea this was 2 days after your shot. So for those of us at home who are preparing for that and thinking about all the things to reschedule right after the second shot, you are a true hero.
Well, thank you. I will say I'm sure that it is much less difficult than the real thing. So go get your shot.
Well, we usually start our conversation by getting a sense of what is going on in your world, and kind of we start with how are you holding up right now. So we obviously know about that, but in terms of the presidency, how are you holding up right now, and kind of can you give us a sense of what it's like right now for you as a leader?
I feel, fingers crossed, like we're finally turning a corner. Vaccines, we've started getting vaccines out on campus to faculty and staff. We're moving pretty quickly. I think we're up to about 500 doses out now in the last 3 weeks, which feels really great. We think we have a date set that we haven't announced yet for bringing students back for summer research and opening up our residence halls. LA County got really, really hard hit, and none of us were able to bring students back until, just about now. So we'll be able to bring people back to work, which is really great. That was probably the hardest part this last year. Now we're planning for what we hope is a mixture of celebration in the fall and an acknowledgement that there's been a lot of loss in our country and around the world. But I'm starting to feel like, okay, we just got to keep this going a little while longer, and we'll make it.
Curious, what has leading during this period been like, and what did you do differently? How different was it for you, and what did you do differently, and how do you think you've adapted?
Well, I was at a funny time when all of this started. I'd only been at Pomona a couple of years. I was in the middle of rebuilding my leadership team. We just hired 2 new senior staff members, our head of advancement and our head of finance and operations. So they got here in December, and then by March, we were all home and trying to build a kind of camaraderie over Zoom was interesting. But I think what it meant was we lost a lot of formality really quickly. And we moved to daily check-ins every, Monday through Friday. We used to have just a once a week 3-hour palooza of discussion, but it really was a once a week check-in, and it started off with, okay, how are you doing? And then mutual problem solving. And now I feel that after this year, I know them as more than 2-dimensional people on a screen. And I also decided this fall that I was going to teach this spring. I hadn't taught since I got to Pomona, and I felt, first of all, like I really, really missed students. And I also, on the empathy front, kind of felt like all of my faculty colleagues were really struggling with coming to terms with how to make a classroom work and to be their best selves. And I figured, you know what, I'm going to throw myself into it and see how it plays out. So I think this little screen can be a big equalizer if you approach it that way.
So I'm curious, I was looking into your background in advance of the show, and I didn't know that you were a AAAS very distinguished faculty member. But when I looked at what your area of expertise is, English, and it touches on neuroscience and the connection between how art and music connect with the brain. Am I in the ballpark? So I'm super curious about, in this time where we know that people are so burnt out and the Zoom fatigue and all of this, I bet you have very strong views on what people should be doing to try and bring back some semblance of normalcy connected to exposing themselves to some kind of art or some kind of, I'm just curious about, like, what is the best practice from your perspective that you've been using to inspire your team that draws upon your background in terms of your expertise?
It's interesting, Bridget. I also decided I was going to write another book last January before all of this went to heck in a handbasket. And the book is about aesthetics and time, right? And how you can come down to a single kind of time point in a powerful experience, or it can just seem like time never stops. And so one thing that my team and I have done is instead of holding the usual student office hours, we picked an art form, and we have just had a kind of study break with students talking about, what music they listen to, what they've been doing to get outside of themselves. And music is really interesting because oftentimes we bring pro-social goals to how we listen to music. We listen to music to be with each other. We listen to music to dance together. We listen to music to share a mood. And even if you're doing it on your headphones, you are building a connection with someone outside of you or something outside of you that can help you feel not quite so closed in. We also played a little game following on The Office, where we decided to explain our worst decision, real or fantasy, in terms of a piece of literature, a film, or a TV show. And that was pants-wettingly funny for the entire team. And it was just one of those moments like, okay, we're just gonna take advantage of the fact that none of us is living in our normal way. And we got some great answers. My favorite involved the color purple. And the response was, I should have spit in his lemonade more.
It's pretty great.
Love it. That's good. No, for folks at home, it's like we all just need some tips in terms of, because I think a lot of people, there are so many things that we would interact with that were, soul awakening touch points in culture, that by being in Zoom and in this two-dimensional world for the last year, I think a lot of people have forgotten that they actually have access to music, they have access to dance, they have access to other things that are going to be really helpful in terms of their resilience and navigating through right now.
Yeah, and you can do an awful lot. I mean, there's a woman named Nora, who's a scholar, who writes about the fact that art is kind of a prosthetic for us as human beings. It can make us feel stronger. It can make us feel more powerful, faster, more precise, better. And human beings need prosthetics. And it's not just technologies like these. It's creativity, and it's human connection, and human beings, not in a utilitarian way, but are we can engage with as extensions of each other to do something good in the world. And reminding yourself that even in isolation, you have those possibilities of connection. is really helpful.
I'm curious, Pomona, when I think about sort of the continuum of higher ed, Pomona is probably among the places whose way of operating instructionally and otherwise probably has been affected as much as any place by the pandemic. And I'm curious, as you think about sort of what from this year is likely to be sustained certainly in how you lead, but also in how sort of where you lead the institution. What do you think is likely to have staying power?
Well, from the human perspective, I think it is the trying to reinforce the idea that none of us can do everything, that you're going to have to pick and choose as to how you engage. We tell students all the time, there's so much out there, there's so much to do, take advantage of everything. And it's not healthy for them. And so what I'm hoping is that we can take this sense of self-regulation, that we don't have to do everything and we can't expect ourselves to do everything. And then I think there are some pedagogical things that we can take from this experience as well. Several of our faculty in math had planned before all of this happened a math summer intro to college math over the summer. It was always meant to be online and split up by time zones. And the idea was, no matter how good high school you went to, or how great you are at math, or how well prepared you are, they're just different things you have to do in college. And they did this pilot program. The students who were in it loved it. And not only did they come to school with study partners, but they came to school having listened to each other. Because when you're sitting there with a novel problem in a group of 5, you don't have any choice but to. And it also reminded us that, things like bridge programs that are meant to foster inclusivity on a college campus, they shouldn't start on the college campus. They should start where the students are, and wherever that is, and then start to build a community that comes with them, rather than saying your community starts here. So I think there are all sorts of things that we've done for outreach that I really hope we continue.
Following up on that, I know that Pomona is just in a fundamentally different space in terms of really an exemplar leading institution, but there's been a lot of chatter about small private liberal arts colleges, and we know that many of them around the country are very nervous and trying to figure out how to navigate. And I'm guessing, I don't know, I could be wrong, are they reaching out to you, or do you have any advice that you're giving to other leaders who might not be in a Pomona institution, but that because of your experience you are helping kind of give them a bit of hope to navigate?
Well, I hope so. But one of the things that makes Pomona special is that we really exist in a tight consortium, and there are a lot of schools that are in consortia in name, but we really we're cheek by jowl. Like, you just walk across the street and it's the next college. And so we've taken this time to try to align our policies with each other, to really think about how we can collaborate better, what services we really can share, and how we can enhance our curriculum by working with each other, and what partnerships we can create. So we're also part of a group called the Liberal Arts College Racial Equity Leadership Alliance. And that group started by Lori White at DePaul, and we were really trying to say, what can we do more together than we could do separately? Can we join it together to create the next generation of faculty? Can we join together to create the next generation of leadership? Can we share pipelines so that we can be agnostic as to what college a low-income student might attend, but unite all of our pipeline programs so that we can share the wealth? Some of us live in really diverse communities and some of us don't. And how can we bring that strength, that the individual strength that each of us might have, together? We're just in the beginning of starting a partnership with a community college whose president I met at the same time I met Bridget on the California Higher Ed COVID Recovery Group, who's right here in LA. And we're like, okay, this is where we should be working together to get their students, not to Pomona necessarily, it may not be a match, but from an AA granting institution like Compton College to a 4-year institution where the students can blossom. So really just saying, no matter how far we are at a distance, we can and should work together, because none of us can do it on our own. And when we think we can, or we think that we're in competition with each other, there are plenty of students to go around. It's a question of how we can best serve the students who need serving.
That's great. And Keith's awesome. He's been on this show before. So, it is interesting that perception of scarcity and that we're competing for students and there's not enough of them brings out the worst in every institution. It really, and like the problems that we need to struggle with as a sector really need a lot more heads than one. And so we have to kind of, I know that the enrollment numbers, people are freaking out, but it takes a bit of courage for us to be like, no, we're not going to just like let this scarcity pull us into contract and to, play defense and hide the ball. So that's crazy right now.
And it's also this conversation, it's not just scarcity, but it's exclusivity, right? My daughter was applying for high schools this year, and we were driving around, everything's shut, so we could just peer around the edges, and she's only 13. And she said something that I really wish a bunch of 60-year-olds that I know who are college presidents would say. She said, Mommy, this school has a really low admissions rate. It's one of the most highly selective schools around. And I thought if I didn't go, I was passing up something special. I was one of the few people who got let in. And then she's like, well, why am I judging myself by how exclusive the community is that I would be joining? And if I hadn't been driving, I would have turned around and just hugged her and kissed her, because it was incredibly spot on. It's just, that's not how we need to judge ourselves, especially in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We're going to judge ourselves on who we exclude. That's not the way to actually be successful. It's the way to narrow success so that other people don't get it. And there's no point to that.
Yeah, and especially as we know that young people right now, their level of anxiety is incredibly high in the midst of what's going on. The last thing they need is excessive competition and all of the vibes of exclusivity. So that's great.
Bridget, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm curious about you as a leader.
I have a visitor.
That's great. This is real time life. So I'm curious about you as a leader. If you were, and I find that this is interesting when I ask people on the staff of a president, what's their leadership philosophy? It really varies. And it seems like there isn't enough conversation where leaders get to kind of like set the table and say, this is my philosophy. This is how I lead. This is how I want this is how I make decisions. So I'm curious if you can describe for us what you would say is your leadership philosophy or style for those at home.
I would say two things. On the one hand, many years ago, when my husband and I were getting married, We're both busy professionals, and we're not like tied up on glamour. So we said, we're going to hire the best people that we can and then just get out of their way. And that's my philosophy on faculty hiring, on leadership hiring. Find the person that has the skills that you need, and then let them move. And so our strategic planning was entirely like that, very bottom up, and driven by faculty who truly care. And so much has come out of that, even in the past year, around ideas for inclusive classrooms, which is extraordinary work that a handful of faculty have just been exploding out into the curriculum. How can that work? Our chief operating officer had been through 3 government shutdowns. That was the best hire, one of the best hires I could possibly have made in this climate. And just say, all right, you know what you're doing. I don't. I mean, I don't know the insides and outs of debt refinancing. So put your team together and then expect them to work as a team. So they joke about the fact that budgeting right now is the iron cage death match. I lock them in a room. I mean, there's no room, there's no lock, but I just say, don't come to me with any budget proposal that you all don't agree on. And if you don't all agree on it, come up with a majority. And if you need a minority opinion, tell me, but don't come to me individually with requests. And that's the sense of, I need everyone to be focused on each other's needs too, and whether or not their needs rise to the top. And I think that ethos of teamwork and mutual respect and building that mutual respect is, for me, the only way that I could possibly lead. I'm not good at telling people what to do, as you might have seen, since I have a 10-year-old who just popped in, even though he knows mommy's door was closed.
It happens. I love it. We have a response. I think there's a defense going on right now.
A minority opinion.
Minority opinion is good. That's great. Doug, do you want to do this last one?
What advice, since we generally have a lot of sort of would be sort of early and mid-career people, what advice would you give to somebody who either is coming into a presidency for the first time or has that ahead? What's and I don't know if it's a piece of advice you got in the past, but or something you've adapted, but how would you advise about to be presidents or want to be presidents?
The first thing I would say is you have no idea what you're getting into. None. No matter what you think, how prepared you are, you have no idea what you're getting into. And recognize that. And the second thing is, I had a colleague at NYU, Charles Bertolami, who said, Gabby, just remember that everything addressed to you really should be read as Dear Occupant. So it's like the stuff you get in the mail that's not really addressed to you. So don't take things personally. Do everything that you can to realize that you are the institution in so many people's minds, and your responsibility is to keep that institutional perspective in mind, and then realize that's not the only one, because you've got whatever a faculty member's perspective may be constrained by their department. A chair will have a larger one, a dean will have a broader one, but all of those perspectives are valid, right? Just because one is more capacious than the other it doesn't mean that it's any more fundamentally right. So try to keep all of those perspectives going in your head as much as possible. And then the last bit of advice I get sounds kind of macabre, but it was live like death is on your shoulder. Meaning that you're making decisions, you're going to do them the best you can at the time that you do them. And, the outcome is not always up to you. So resign yourself to that, and you'll be happier.
As that's also about lack of regret too, presumably. Yeah, that's a good way to live, I think.
Yeah. I love the dear occupant. Man, so many, that's so applicable to so many people. Doug, I want to tell you that. That makes things a little bit less stressful. So, yeah. President Starr, it's been really delightful to have you here today. Really wonderful to get to know you on the Recovery with Equity Task Force, and excited to be able to share some of your wisdom with others. So thank you so much for making the time for us. And Doug, excellent co-hosting per usual. And for those at home, we're going to be meeting with Dan Greenstein next week from the Chancellor of the Pennsylvania System. So stay tuned for that, and we will see you then. Otherwise, everyone have a great week, and love the 10-year-old pop in. This is great. It's really it makes us hip and cool and young.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, you just lowered the audience level by a lot. So.
Yeah, it's great.
Our average viewer age. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.